going to show you how to make the heart to heart applique from Kreative Kiwi, and for that I'm going to be using a 4x4 hoop, matching bobbin and threads, masking tape, pins to pin around the top edge of my hoop. You can use any, you don't have to have anything special for that, as long as they hold your stabiliser from pulling down in the hoop, they're fine. Squizzers, piece of cord to hang it from, and I've got my fabrics and batting cut to size. I've also got a photograph, because I'm going to show you how to add a photo in the top heart, and some vinyl which will go over the top of the heart and the photo. Before we get started on this stitch out, I just want to explain something to you. You get the whole alphabet in this set, and there's 2 of each letter. There's a top and there's a bottom. The top is self-explanatory, it's this one here. Anything that falls below that is a bottom letter. So you're going to stitch this backwards. So you start off with the last letter of your word and work your way through it. And each one of these is a bottom. And then the last one that you stitch will be your top one. I hope that makes things easy for you. And you can add as many letters as you want and make up all your own applique. You're going to start off by hooping your wash away stabiliser, and I've got 2 layers here. And I like to pin around the top edge of my hoop to stop the stabiliser from being pulled down between the frames. Take my pin, rest it on top of the hoop, push it through the stabiliser, and then just bring it back round, and it now sits neatly on top of the frame and stops the stabiliser from being pulled down. And depending on how big a frame you've got will depend on how many pins you use around the edge, of course, but for a 4x4 I just use 4 pins. You're now going to load your first file into your machine, and to stitch this design you're going to add your letters from the last up to the first. That way, as the hearts are stacked one on top of the other, the word will form around the right way. Once you've loaded your file into your machine, you're now going to stitch round number 1, and that's going to give you your batting placement outline. Take your batting and place it over the outline, and then tape it in place. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 2, and that's going to secure your batting in place. You're going to trim away the excess batting from around the edge of the stitch line. You can now place your front fabric over the top of the batting and tape it in place. Just got to make sure that there isn't a right direction on this. I think there is. We're then going to pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 3 to secure it. Load whichever colour thread you want into your machine for the quilting, and then you're going to stitch round number 4. You're now going to stitch out the letter, so change your thread to whichever colour you want for it, and then you're going to stitch round number 5, and the letter I'm stitching is the E out of love. You're now going to add your backing fabric, so turn your hoop over, place your fabric over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 6 to secure it. You're now going to trim up all the excess fabric from both the front and back of your hoop. So starting with the back, turn your hoop over and then trim it away. Next you're going to do the zigzagging, and that's going to be done in 3 parts. It's going to come around here, then stop, then you'll stitch the V at the bottom of the point of the heart, and then after that you'll carry on and stitch the remaining right hand side of the heart. Now if this is your first letter, then you're going to stitch one after the other without having to do anything. The reason it's done like that is so that you can join one heart to the next, and that area here is going to be the join. When you're ready, load your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 7. So as this is the first heart, I'm just going to do nothing and stitch round number 8. And now round number 9. Load whichever colour matching bobbin and thread you want for the satin stitch around the border, and then you're going to stitch round number 10. Round number 11 is going to stitch the decorative top stitching on top of the satin stitching. So if you want to do this in a different colour, change your matching bobbin and thread to another colour now. If not, carry on with whatever colour you're using. So that's our first heart stitched. You can now remove that from the hoop. We now need to trim up close to the stitch line in the V here, because that's going to be our join line. We can now set that aside, ready to join to the next heart. Hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. Load your file into your machine, then pop it into your machine and stitch round number 1 to give you your batting placement outline. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2. Trim away the excess batting. Place your front fabric over the batting and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3. Load the thread that you want for your quilting into your machine and stitch round number 4. Load the thread colour for your letter into your machine and then stitch round number 5. It's now time to add the backing, so turn your hoop over, place your fabric over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 6 to secure it. Trim up the excess fabric from both front and back of your hoop, so turn your hoop over. Now going to stitch round number 7, and that's going to zigzag from here down to there, and it will stop to allow us to join the previous heart to this one. We're now going to join the first heart to this one, and you want to line this stitch line here up with this stitch line here, and it should sit neatly one on top of the other. And then you're going to pin it and tape it in place. Keep your pins right out of the way of the stitch line. I'm just going to add a little piece of tape on the shoulders here, just to keep them flat while it's stitching. So pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 8, and that's going to zigzag over the V. Check your join, and as you can see here, none of this heart is sticking out past the stitch line of this one here, so I'm happy with that join. Once you're happy with it, you can then stitch round number 9. If you're not, just run a stitch unpicker down the zigzagging and reposition it and stitch round number 8 once more. It's well worth taking the time to get these right. Make sure you've got your matching bobbin and thread in your machine for the satin stitching, and then you're going to stitch round number 10. Change your bobbin and thread to your contrasting one for the top stitching if you're going to, and then stitch round number 11. We're now going to free your segment from the hoop. And that's your first 2 segments completed, and all the rest will be done in exactly the same way. Hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. Load your file into your machine, then pop it into your machine and stitch round number 1 to give you your batting placement outline. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2. Trim away the excess batting. Place your front fabric over the batting and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3. Load the thread that you want for your quilting into your machine and stitch round number 4. Load the thread colour for your letter into your machine and then stitch round number 5. You're now going to add your backing fabric, so turn your hoop over and place it over the outline, and then tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 6 to secure it. You're now going to trim up the excess fabric from both the front and back, so starting with the back, turn your hoop over. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 7, and that's going to zigzag from here down to here. We're now going to join this segment to this one. Just turn it around so that I can see what I'm doing. And you're going to lay this stitch line here on top of this stitch line here, so make sure that you've trimmed up close to the stitch line in this V area. Then you're going to pin it in place, keeping your pins out of the way, of course. I'm going to add some tape just to keep those shoulders flat. You're going to pop this into your machine and stitch round number 8. Check your join, and if you're happy with it, you can then stitch round to number 9. If not, unpick it, realign it, and stitch round number 8 again. Make sure you've got your matching bobbin and thread loaded, and you're now going to stitch round number 10, and that's going to do the satin stitch border. If you're using a contrasting thread for your top stitch, now is the time to change it, and then you're going to stitch round number 11. You're now going to free your segment from the hoop, so turn your hoop over. And that's your third segment completed. Hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. Load your file into your machine, then pop it into your machine and stitch round number 1 to give you your batting placement outline. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2. Trim away the excess batting. Place your front fabric over the batting and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3. Load the thread that you want for your quilting into your machine and stitch round number 4. Load your thread colour for the letter into your machine and then stitch round number 5. You're now going to add your backing fabric, so turn your hoop over and place it over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 6 to secure it. Trim up the excess fabric from both the front and back. Starting with the back, turn your hoop over. Pop your hoop back into your machine, stitch round number 7, and that's going to zigzag from here down to here. You're now going to join your previous segment to this one, and once again you're going to sit this stitch line here on top of this stitch line here. I'm going to turn this around to the side so that I can see what I'm doing, and then you're going to pin it in place. Keep your pins right out of the way of the stitch line. You're now going to pop that back into your machine and stitch round number 8 to join them. Check your join to make sure that you're happy with it, and if you are, stitch round number 9. If not, unpick it, reposition it and re-stitch round number 8. Make sure that you've got your matching bobbin and thread in your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 10, which is the satin stitch. Load your contrasting bobbin and thread into your machine if you're using one, and then you're going to stitch round number 11. Now going to free this from the hoop. I'm going to make sure that I've trimmed up close to the stitching here. That's all ready for the final join on the last hooping. Now set these aside. We're now going to do one more hooping, and there's going to be a photograph that's going to sit inside the satin stitching like so. You're going to use the top letter, so just pick a letter, it doesn't matter which, because we're not going to actually stitch the letter out. So we'll be doing the quilting because we want this kept nice and flat so it doesn't cause the photo to bulge, but we're not going to stitch the letter out. And the reason why you want the file marked top is because it has a complete satin stitch all around the whole of the border. You're also going to be able to add little sparkly bits inside if you wanted to. So for this hooping, I've got my wash away stabiliser and my fabrics and batting as before. I've got a photo. Now there is a template included in the files that you can print out at actual size. Do not scale it or fit to printer. Print it out at actual size, cut it out, and then you've got a template for your photo. I've also got some plastic tablecloth. It's very thin, it's just sort of table protector there, and I'm going to add a hanging loop as well, so I've got a little piece of cord. Hoop and pin your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser. Load your file into your machine, then pop it into your machine and stitch round number 1 to give you your batting placement outline. Place your batting over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2. Trim away the excess batting. Place your front fabric over the batting and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3. Load the thread that you want for your quilting into your machine and stitch round number 4. I'm now going to add the hanger and the backing. Now, the easiest way to put a hanger on is to place it over the outline after you've done your first round of stitching and tape it in place like so. I forget, so I'm going to do it now. So turn your hoop over. I'm going to place my hanger over the outline and then tape it in place. I'm now going to add my backing fabric and tape that in place as well. You can now pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 6. Now don't stitch round number 5 because that's the letter, and we're skipping that altogether because it's not going to be seen. If you do stitch it by accident, it doesn't really matter, but it's not going to be seen anyway. The reason I've done the quilting is to keep the fabric nice and flat so it's not all puffy and pushing against my photo. Trim up the excess fabric both front and back, so turn your hoop over and take care not to cut your loop if you've added one to the back. You're now going to pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 7, and that's going to do the satin stitch on the left hand edge. So we're now going to join these exactly the same way as before. We're going to put this stitch line here so that it sits on top of this one here. I'll turn this to the side and position it carefully, and then pin it in place. I'm going to add some tape to the shoulders. You can now pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch round number 8, and that's going to zigzag the V here. And check your join as before, and if you're happy with it you can then stitch round number 9. Put your matching bobbin and thread for the satin stitch into your machine, and then you're going to stitch round number 10. This is the template that you get in the set, and there's one of these for each size hoop. So all you need to do is cut this out and then position that over your photo, draw around it, and then cut that out as well. And the best thing to do is cut inside the line rather than outside, because you're going to have a pencil or pen's width on top of your line. I'm now going to add the photo, and I've put a little bit of spray glue on the back just so that it doesn't move around. And then I'm just going to position it right in the middle of the frame. Next I'm going to lay my vinyl, making sure that I haven't got any bits of fluff and dust on it, because once they're stitched down they're trapped forever. I'm going to put that over the top and then take this in place. You're now going to pop that into your machine and stitch round number 11, and that's going to stitch nearly all the way around, and it's going to leave a gap, and I'll explain why in a minute. Load your contrasting bobbin and thread into your machine if you're using a contrast, and then stitch round number 11. Okay, so the majority of it's stitched and we've got this gap here. If you want to add any sparkly beads or anything else inside, it's easier to put them into here and then stitch it, because as soon as you start stitching, beads tend to jump around all over the place and they just go everywhere, and you don't want your needle hitting any of the glass beads. So what I've got, a plastic drinking straw, and I'm just going to push that in there like that. I've got my beads in a little plastic pot, and very carefully, I'm just going to push this along a bit, very carefully I'm going to squeeze the pot and tip them down inside the straw. I'm just doing it slowly. You should be able to see them coming out the other end. Just going to tip it up a bit. And actually I think that's enough in there. You can put as many or as few as you like in. Just going to poke them down a little bit, just so they're out of the way. Okay. I'm now going to tape up the top once again. Pop your hoop back into your machine and stitch around number 12. If you don't want to add any beads, you can just go straight to round number 12. I've slowed my machine right down to the slowest it will go. I'm just holding the beads at this end of the frame so they don't bounce forwards, and I'm now going to stitch round number 12. Before removing this from the hoop, we're going to trim up the vinyl. So just take it up to the edge. Careful not to cut your stitching though. I'm now going to free this from the hoop. And then careful not to cut off my hanger. Now all that remains is to dissolve all the wash away stabiliser. I've got my cotton bud and some warm water, and I'm just going to run it round the edge. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new videos as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's always lots of ideas and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me.